So today I'm with Donald Nelson,
Hello.
Justine and Mierre Gillen, who I've met under various circumstances in different festival fields, in different places over the last 20 years. And I'm going to start talking to Donald Nelson, or Donald Nelson is going to start rattling on about how he first came into the sphere of the world of completely bonkers festivating with John Rowe. Donald, how did you find me?
Well, I started off storytelling when I worked for Glasgow Libraries, and then my brothers and my cousin would go to Cambridge Folk Festival, and they said, "Why don't you come to Cambridge? In fact, they've got storytellers there." So I contacted Cambridge Folk Festival, and they said, "Oh, you got to speak to a guy called John Rowe." So I thought, right, okay. And John said, "I'm always glad to have new storytellers. Come down to Cambridge." So I went, had a wonderful time, met half of his family, and then the next year I sent John a message saying, "I would love to do Cambridge again." And John said, "Well, I only get the same tellers back every 2 or 3 years." And uh, and I said, "That's fine." And then he said to me, "But in compensation, would you like to work at Glastonbury?" I was like, "Oh, wow, wow." He said, "Glastonbury, yeah." And that year, I think uh, Don McLean, Paul Simon, B.B. King were all playing, and I got to go. Okay, I had to do a bit of work, but I still got to see all these people, and it was wonderful. And ever since then, John has been not off my back, asking me to do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. And for this man here, I would do almost, almost anything, storytelling wise.
Yeah. So this year I got Deborah, who's director of this year for Chippenham Folk Festival, said, "I'm fed up with organising the storytellers. Can you organise the storytellers, John?" So I thought, all right, and so I booked Donald, and he walked from Glasgow, so it took him some time to get here. But
I was actually a day late because I get put off the motorway at Birmingham because of a big accident, and I got lost.
so the other thing we've done together is, well, over the pestilence, I ran I curated a storytelling website called worldstorytellingcafe.com, and I got hold of everyone I'd ever met on the road. And we ended up with about 200 tellers. We were doing 26 hours programming a week through the pestilence, and then and it was run from Marrakesh. Well, first of all, our techies were in Romania, and then Marrakesh, because the person behind the site was in the hospitality industry in Marrakesh, and his booking people were in Romania, and so to keep his staff busy, because he was paying them throughout the pestilence, he gave me his staff. So I suddenly had this technical crew, which was fantastic, and I got hold of everyone, including Donald and Justine and Mierre, and so. And they appeared virtually. So, was this your entrance to the world of Zoom virtual storytelling?
Yes, it was the World Storytelling Cafe, but it just perplexes me how I managed to get to Morocco, no problem, but I couldn't get to Chippenham.
Yeah. We put on a couple of festivals about 8 days after the borders opened in Morocco. We put on an actual physical festival in Marrakesh. And you didn't make the first one, did you? Or did you come to the first one?
No, I didn't make the first one. No,
But
no,
you
I
came to the
was.
second.
Remember, well, I won't go into why I couldn't make it.
No, but you
was
were at the second.
I came to the second
Yeah,
one.
no, I resurrected him. He was incredibly ill, so for the first one. So I said, "That's no excuse. Get there for the second, because I'm a sensitive geezer." And but there was someone who was here for the first one, and that was Maria Gillen. And so, how on earth did I get to you?
Well, no, I don't know if you remember this, John Rowe, but 3 days after St. Patrick's Day, the country got locked down, and we had all trained ourselves on Zoom in those 3 days. So you can imagine all these oral storytellers, and we had absolutely no interest in ever doing anything online. And then suddenly, Paddy's Day is coming, and we have to be able to tell stories, or something worse is going to happen in the world. So we organised a St. Patrick's storytelling session for an hour, and it went on for maybe 6 hours. And during that time, this man came in with flowing white locks, with a big smile, and telling us all about the World Storytelling Cafe. And that was John. And he thought that he could come in and get out unscathed, but no, we grabbed onto him, and you became part of a clan Scéalta, the story family, and now we follow him around and go to his festivals.
So you managed to get to the first. You managed to
did.
get that festival was. Well, I'd been over in the November because they'd opened the borders. You couldn't fly directly. They wouldn't let you fly in directly from Britain. So to get there, I flew to Barcelona, overnight to Barcelona, and came in via Barcelona. So I was allowed in through the border into Morocco. Providing I'd had enough jabs, and I was quite happy. Stick anything in me if it allows me to travel, and and stay alive as a secondary object. And so and it was fantastic because nothing was happening in 2 years
Yeah.
of lockdown in Morocco, which was devastating because they had no money coming in whatsoever. A lot of the guys had gone back to the desert, a lot of the traders. And so I was going around and trying to organise things and shaking more hands than I'd ever shaken in my life. And then we got it all organised, including having a circle on the square, which was the traditional place where storytelling happens in Marrakesh. And it had been going on for hundreds of years there, because Marrakesh, the tourist industry isn't new. It's been, 100 years ago or so, 150 years ago, there were 6,000 camels in the square, 2,000 coming, 2,000 going, and 2,000 there. And it was a stopping off place between Timbuktu and the coast. And the storytellers were part of that. And the traders just wanted somewhere to sell, somewhere to sleep, and entertainment and worship. So the entertainment was always, and part of the entertainment was storytelling on the square. But then the square started getting noisy, too many snake charmers, too many monkeys on chains, and drummers and so forth. And it was very difficult for the storytellers. And people were losing interest. They, the mobile phone and the tablets and so forth. So it was there was Clock Cafe, which was a guy called Mike Richardson ran, an English guy ran, and he started storytelling there and invited some of the masters in, and they were and they got a group of young storytellers around them. And I was lucky enough, I'd had a stroke and I was taken, someone thought it was a good idea to recover in Marrakesh because, why sit around here in convalescing when you could be somewhere that was completely bonkers? And Marrakesh suited me down to the ground, the anarchy of it. And so I met the masters, one of the masters. And this time, when I was organising, we met the masters again. and they, I couldn't understand the word they were saying, whether they were going to let these young upstarts, and especially international upstarts, come in and run the square. And then after a while, Zuhair, who's my Moroccan counterpart, said, "The masters have decided we will not have one circle, we will have 5." We had one in the end. But then, so I thought I had everything done. We got the Riads booked, I had my storytellers booked. Everything was as it should be. Nothing could possibly go wrong.
Tempt fate, why don't you?
And so then they closed the borders again. And everyone said, "You're going to cancel the festival?" I said, "No, if the borders are open, we'll do it." And 8 days before the festival, the borders opened. So we were the first thing happening in North Africa, throughout Africa. So we're in all the papers and the television and everything else. And amongst there was about 20 international storytellers managed to get there. Others, some weren't vaccinated. Some, there was the flights. There was no way of flying in. But amongst the people who did get there, because she just, I think she got a paper airplane and flew it down. Was Maria Gillen.
That's it.
So tell me your experience of that first storytelling festival that you were there.
Well, it felt a little bit like magic. It felt like, is this going to happen? And the day before I was due to fly, I was on 96 FM Cork Local Radio. It's the second biggest station in Ireland. And during the conversation, he said to me, "Do you think they'll allow you on the plane?" And it was that kind of moment in history where I had to think about it. And then I said, "No, I'm definitely going," because some people are already there. Some of our colleagues from the UK had gone the day before. So I travelled up that morning to Dublin. And remember now, we hadn't seen anybody with legs in a long time. And I saw all these Irish tellers and the emotion. It's hard to fathom now, but the emotion of seeing one another after a 2-year hiatus. And we had the Irish flag and we were singing in the airport. And then we went over to Morocco, where they were very strict. They were very strict when you were coming in. So we'd had to go for a super duper test before being allowed to leave Ireland. So you had to go for a special one that the airlines organised. And then when we got to Morocco, we had to go through the test again, and they were sticking things up our noses and down our throats, taking the address of where you were going to be. And we were like, where are we going to be? And we found that out the morning that we were traveling, because in the background, there was such interest at such short notice that the team in Morocco were running around trying to find out where they were going to put us. What a logistic miracle. Like, because I've been an operations manager. So to imagine that they were able to pull this off almost in a 24-hour period, as more and more people were allowed to come into Morocco, was absolutely mesmeric. And I suppose when I was listening to you, John, one of the things that struck us at home, we have a thing called penny dinners in Cork. And for the last 100 years, anybody who needs a dinner and can't get one anywhere can go into penny dinners and one will be provided. And there is a place in Marrakesh called Henna Cafe, and it is run by everybody nodding, and it's run by Lucy and by Mike, and they fed people every day. During the pestilence, during the lurgy, like there was 500 people being fed, and we as artists ate the same stuff that they were giving people, and it was high quality, wasn't it? It was good, basic but beautiful food. And because of that, the King of Morocco took notice. And by the second year, he had given his stamp of approval to the festival, and UNESCO is backing the festival as well. So for us as storytellers, we're going, this is magic. It's a light in the tunnel. We're going to follow this light. The front of the light, the pinnacle, is our John Rowe, so we don't leave him out of our sight. We're like, John, we know we're coming to Morocco next year, but when can we meet you during the year so that we can keep up the contact? And hence here I am in Chippenham, And I was in Cambridge last year, and I met, you were talking about the acts, the Proclaimers, which are like,
Yeah.
they're my heroes from the 80s. I was singing at them and scaring the living daylights out of them. And John got me into the green room, which is supposed to be a secret, but this is only amongst our friends. And I also met Sharon Shannon, who is she's a hero of mine. She plays the Buskakiol, the box, and we have lovely box players here in this festival today who know exactly who she is. Yeah. So not only do you get to know our fellow storytellers, but you get to know all of these people around the edges as well. The musicians and the dancers and the organizers who pull these miracles together on a shoestring. So,
and you managed to take over a riad in Marrakesh and organise an Irish American evening.
That's right.
Which was bonkers.
Bonkers in the right way, can I say? Bonkers in the right way. But yes, indeed, and that became a real highlight for us. So we did that the first year, and all of the Irish and the American tellers gathered together in this one Riad Les Yeux Bleus, and they are so good to me. I love them. I love the two lads that put me up in Riad Les Yeux Bleus, and they brought me back the second year as well. And they have this magical Arabian room with a huge fireplace a few feet off the ground, and these big gold tables and magical vases, and it really looked like the Arabian Nights. And we set up our cameras, and people dialed in from all over the States and from Ireland, but also we had tellers from Ireland and from the States and Morocco. So my biggest problem as the banatee or the woman of the house for that session was keeping people inside their time. It's a very difficult thing, and everybody wanted to be involved. Everybody. So, and then the second year, people were signing up, and I was going, I can only allow this many in. And you become a policeman, don't you? You know, kind of. I was like, you know, we've only got an hour and a half, so I can only have this many people in, and you have only 10 minutes. And I found myself on the other side of time, because normally I'm the one saying, 10 minutes, for God's sake.
Oh, thank you, Maria. Now, she only made it to the second festival, but I've known Justine for a couple of days. Where did we first bump into each other?
So we first bumped into each other. This is just the strangest story. When my eldest son, who is now 18, was 18 months old, we went on holiday to Centre Parks. And who was telling in the sports hall? But John Rowe. And that's where I met John Rowe, in a kind of, you know, like sports hall in a, you know, in a leisure centre. And he was actually, I think, probably the second professional storyteller that I'd met since I'd been a professional storyteller. I met a lovely woman called Catherine Holt, and I was like, oh, female storyteller about my age, that's the thing you could do. So I was like, that'll be my job. And then I think a couple of years after that, actually, no, maybe even that year, I think I met you in Centre Parks. And I'd always wanted to work in prisons. And even then I harassed John to get me to work in prisons. I think it took him another 10 years. Been quicker to commit a crime and be in there the other side. So I think that's where we first met. And then probably various festivals around East Anglia. I'd been storytelling for must have been about 5 years, and I started sort of telling on the East Anglian circuit. So we kind of ran into each other a bit there. And I think it was about 2014, I sort of had this idea that actually East Anglian storytelling has a kind of quite an irreverent spirit, which I think John embodies. So, which I love.
I'm a very serious person.
He's really not. So I started kind of asking around and drew together some tellers to form a thing called the East Anglian Storytelling Festival. And for me, John had to be one of the headliners, because that spirit of fun, spirit of play, not taking yourself too seriously, is very much for me what East Anglian storytelling was about. So I think I gave you paid work before you gave me paid work. Is that about right?
I rarely give people paid work.
Unless they pay them first.
I know that.
But then since then we kind of tell at festivals. So I've done Cambridge with you. Oh God, yeah. The amount of people that you get to see at Cambridge, it is incredible, and it's an absolute joy. Although, to be honest, my favourite thing at festivals is always sitting around a campfire with other tellers. Me and Vera, I think that first Cambridge set up, we thought, what's that light in the distance? Oh, that's the sunrise. So, yeah, always getting me into trouble, John. And we tell together at Folk East. We run the storytelling there. Where else? I can't remember, John. There's so many things.
There's a few.
There's a
And of
few.
course, I did eventually get you behind bars.
It did. It took a while.
It was doing we were doing a project for called Once Upon a Time with a writer called Alistair Fruish, who's a fantastic experimental writer, and he's worked in prisons nearly as long as I was the first storyteller in residence in a British prison. In residence, I managed to leave every night, but I think I've done about I haven't done so much since Pestilence, but in fact I think I'm due to go in at some point to Leicester, but there's I did about 25, 30 years. I spent more time behind bars than in the prisons than most lifers, and sometimes on long-term, sort of 2 or 3 year residences, going in 2 days a week, and you become the hippie with keys. So anything arty that didn't require, apart from painting, landed on my plate. So people would say, John, can we start a prison band? And I'd say, yeah, well, I'll get the chapel Friday after. As soon as I got to a new prison, I had to explain to the managing chaplain that the chapel, because the chapel always has the best acoustics in the prison, that the chapel is in fact my theatre that I lend them for religious purposes. And most of, I mean, the chaplaincies have been fantastic in the prison. So, and in fact, when I find it, because it's quite as difficult to promote in a prison as it is on the out of anything, and I've stood at the entrance to the chapel with the chaplain on one side and me on the other, because I know everyone's going to want to come to him with their problems first thing in the morning. So I'll stand on the other side and grab them afterwards. And there was one point I brought Benjamin Zephaniah into a prison, and the guy's been asking for him, but that day, now they've got televisions in their cells, which is a lot less trouble. But there used to be in just in the association rooms, and that day there was an Ice-T film on, and everyone had forgotten that Ben was coming in, so. I was standing, so there was the Catholic priest on one side of this corridor or the tunnel, and I was on the other, and we were competing to get the audience. So, I mean, generally we work well together. And eventually, I got a project with Alistair Fruish, and did Dorrigan come in as well on that one?
Dorrigan was on that as well.
Dorrigan as a filmmaker and radio producer more than anything else, and Dorrigan Hammond, and she'd won the Sony Prize for something for a prison radio project she was doing, and we all went in with this Once Upon a Time, and it was in a women's prison, and I find women's prison quite difficult because in men's prison you don't show your emotions, so and it's all banter. In women's prisons it's out there all the time, if they've got cut wrists you can see the stuff. I know that, and I kind of, and there's one governor of a women's prison said to me, he said it's really difficult being a bloke as a governor because he knows 90% of his clients are in there because of what some bloke did to them. So I find it difficult to keep the tears back when I'm working in women's prison. But this was wonderful because there was a group of us, and it was to stories, to tell stories. So at last, after a million years of being asked, I managed to get Justine into that one. And what do you remember from that project?
Oh, it was such a joy. So we had been in a men's prison first, which was kind of just the sounds in there were so hard, kind of the walls and everything. But actually, even with the men, it was amazing, the creativity, when they started to tell. And the fact that we were working with them to tell stories for their children, so that on their visits they had something to connect, just felt really important. They had something to connect with that wasn't to do with why they were away. But the women's prison for me was like really, really special. So I'll tell 2 stories about it that I think are really important. The first one, I was actually telling this to Maria last night. So there was a woman in there that was from Malawi. And I had a story that was from Malawi that I told. And I said to her, can I tell it to you? Because I want to know if I'm doing it right, And she was someone that had grown up around stories. Her grandmother had been a storyteller. So she agreed that I could, and I told it in front of the group. I've never been more nervous telling, can you imagine? And just still the best compliment I've ever had about my storytelling. She said, you tell it like my grandmother did, which was just, amazing for me. But that's not actually the important bit. The important bit is because I told her that story, she went to the prison library and she asked the librarian to get more stories in. And then she phoned her father and reconnected with her dad and asked him about stories, And that's kind of why, for me, it's very important that we tell stories from around the world, because you never know. And then the second story I have to tell you about, which is the most beautiful thing. So it was our very last session in the women's prison, and we've been working with them. I've been teaching them how to tell sensory stories. So if they had young babies, that you could kind of engage with that. And we've been doing traditional stories, and and they'd shared some of their tales and made stories with us. But the last story that John told was the story of the Ribbon Maiden. And if you've not heard it before, it's a story of so there's a ribbon maiden, and the end of it is that she creates this rainbow in the sky. And we all came out of the building and we looked up in the sky, and all the prisoners looked up in the sky. And there was a double rainbow as we came out. And it was the most beautiful thing. And that was the end of the project. It was the most perfect ending to a storytelling project ever. That kind of sense of hope, and that kind of these stories have created this thing. So yeah, it was an incredible experience. And I'm still going to harass him to get me back into prisons. Otherwise, I'm going to have to make a crime, and then I'll see you on the other side.
I've been in prison a few times. Excuse me. Been in prison, but Berlin prison in Glasgow is the hardest place to be, because there are all these big Glasgow blokes that, all these hard men. But see, once you start telling them a story, they just. And my project was when these guys get out of prison to connect with their children, and learn how to read them stories or tell them stories. And these big Glasgow hard men just went.
I think that's just the most important thing about working in prisons. It's finding ways to connect, and I think it makes a huge difference to people. And John was just, at the very forefront of that from the very beginning,
Well, there's because I was the first storyteller in residence in the prison, and it was January the 2nd, and I'd gone in beginning of January. January slack news time, and there's nothing going on, so the newspapers are always looking for news. And I'd given, before I started, I'd given an interview to the Eastern Daily Press, and it was a young reporter, and I said, you'll write down what I tell you, or you'll never get another story from prison. And he did that job, but a stringer picked it up and sent it to the Sun. And so the Sun had me on page 3, and the headline was Jack Cray Nori. And there was a councillor of a blue persuasion, and who said, Constable Baskerville. I mean, what a name. Councillor Baskerville. He said, I'm sure the people of Norfolk don't want their money spent on this sort of thing. And but he came down from BBC Norfolk to the BBC Norfolk. The radio were in there, and they wanted to do an interview. And even the Guardian slammed it. We've been slammed by everyone. But the radio interview, it was snowing that day, and Baskerville was in his car in the car park, and we'd taken a reporter into the management suite, which was outside the prison, and made them tea and so forth, and did the interview. And Councillor Beskell refused to come into the management suite and made the interviewer interview him in the cold in his car in the car park. That bad move, bad move. So the interviewer came in and said, "This is what the idiot said. Do you want to re-record your bit?" And from that point on, it ran for a month. And going back to Donald's point, one of the reasons I've been brought in, there was now there's a big national charity, Storybook Dads, which is run by a woman in Dartmoor, and it's fantastic. But that wasn't existing at that point. I mean, all I can claim is I'm getting the first international publicity for it. But because we had a rather name, well-known president, and everyone would talk about him, and we said we don't talk about individual prisoners, but we'd tell them about the Storybook Dads, which at that point I was putting onto taping over 3-minute demo tapes, and getting guys to read. It was getting guys to read the stories. And the nice thing about that, because so many prisoners have literacy problems, if you were just reading a children's book, all the other prisoners will make fun of you. But if you're reading for your child, that's cool, because everyone has a very romantic idea of their children while they're banged up. So it not only keeps fathers in touch with their children and their families, it improves their literacy. So there's so we got all this fantastic publicity, which it ran for the months all around the world. So everywhere I go in the world now, I see, like in Texas, I went to Texas, and because I'd been on American public radio and Canadian public radio, and in Texas, the relatives run the scheme. They've got an equivalent of Storybook Dads. As I say, the woman who runs it now, who actually, she ran with it. I'm not bureaucratically competent enough to turn it into a national charity. I think she was working in a West Country prison and read about this there was another writer in residence down there, and then she was actually trained by Clive Hopwood, who used to run Rights in Prisons Network, who was a storyteller to Clive Hopwood, and but she's done fantastic work, sort of turn this into, and every prison you go to, and it's now done. You record it and send it down the line to Dartmoor, and they've got workshops and they put sound effects in and stuff that I could never have done. But it's done this great job of connecting people back. So how are we doing? Well, actually, we're pretty. So, Donald, have you got anything further to say?
You are asking me if I've got anything further to say.
Yeah, you've only got 2 minutes, and you're not allowed to say you're never going to work for me again.
Okay, I'm never going to work for you again. There, I've said it. But right, we've all been in the jail, but yeah, I actually loved working in Berlin and Lomos prison, and just telling these guys, as John says, a lot of them are illiterate, so instead of reading stories, you tell them a story and you say, you don't have to read it to your child, you can tell it to them, and that's the beauty of storytelling.
Do you want me to have final thoughts on John Ragg?
Well, or anything, nuclear physics, whatever you like.
I think, given this is about kind of your pootling, what I'm impressed with, that after however many years of harassing you, you are finally writing your autobiography, which the number of us have gone, are you going to put this? We've listened to these stories that he's put down over pints late at night at festivals for years. So it's really lovely that they are getting shared. And I think what's incredible about you, John, is that you are as at home in a prison as you are kind of on a stage. And when we've told on stages at folk festivals, we've worked in schools, we've worked in prisons. And I think that ability, and not all storytellers have that ability to adapt to whatever your audience is, wherever they are, I think is a really rare quality. And I don't think people give you enough credit for it. So that's
It's
why I'm
called-
doing it now on camera.
It's called blagging.
Oh yeah, and also taught my son how to blag things at festivals, so that's good. And he feeds my children.
Mierre.
So we were just also inspired by the time during the pestilence and shortly thereafter, and a lot of that comes down to John. And one of the beautiful things that came out of this for us was MFR, Mad for Road, and it's a group of storytellers, and we don't think about borders or boundaries. We just love one another, and we go to one another's storytelling homes. So there are storytellers from all over the coast of the UK, the same in Ireland. Recently, everybody came to Cork, and it lifts your heart. There was 8 storytellers that came, and I know from talking to our county councillors in Ireland, we want to keep up the ties with the UK despite this Brexit stuff. I know I've said the word now,
Yeah,
Brexit stuff.
Change your language.
we do want
There may
to.
be children listening to this.
we want to stay connected because we love one another, and we've made these story ties over years and years and years, and it was always the thing that brought peace. So so it's lovely being involved in this, John, and in your story, and being a chapter for you.
Well, thank you very much. We're here and at Chippenham Folk Festival. I don't know whether I said that at the beginning, but it is quite important as we're going through various festivals. Today we're at Chippenham.